It began like almost any other late afternoon in Alexandria. The light slanting low over concrete, the salty breath of the Mediterranean in the air, and the ordinary sounds of a neighborhood rehearsing its daily life. Children calling to one another, vendors packing up, a dog barking in the distance. No alarm, no prelude. Yet that day would carve itself into the memory of a street and a city forever. When the call came that a father had attacked his daughters inside their home, it ripped through the calm like a siren. The words on the police radio, the flashing blue of ambulances squeezing through narrow alleys, the hush that fell over familiar faces. All of it made sense only in the wake of one terrible scene. A young girl had been killed, another barely survived, and the man who was supposed to protect them lay wounded and handcuffed. People search for explanations after such tragedies. We look for motives that turn ordinary life into horror. Jealousy, money, mental collapse, revenge, some fissure in family life that widens until it swallows hope whole. We look for warning signs we missed, for neighbors or friends who might have acted differently. We ask whether the system, social services, courts, community networks, could have stepped in. And we ask, in the most painful way, whether the death might have been prevented. This is the story of one such tragedy in Alexandria's Amriya District in 2025. It is a story of grief and anger, but also a careful attempt to reconstruct what happened and why. We will follow the day as it unfolded through witness accounts and forensic evidence, examine the psychological and social pressures surrounding the family, and trace the path of the legal process that followed. Most of all, we will listen to the surviving child, to neighbors, to doctors, and to the shocked city that tried to make sense of what had been done in a home that had seemed unremarkable. The father, known in public reports by the name Ahmed, was not a stranger to those who lived around him. He was a man in his early 40s, often seen walking the block on errands, sometimes nodding to passers-by. The family's apartment did not stand out. 3 rooms above a bakery, curtains that had seen better days, a small balcony where tired laundry hung in the evening breeze, yet ordinary exterior details often hide private storms. After his separation from his wife, Ahmed's life contracted in ways neighbors described as quiet and peculiar. He no longer shared a home with his children on a daily basis, and visits to the girls became intermittent. Those who observed him speak of a man whose once busy presence dwindled into isolation. Less talk with neighbors, fewer trips to the market, a tendency to keep his head lowered. Divorce is heavy in any conservative society, and it has particular social implications in neighborhoods where reputation and family stability carry weight. For many men and women, separation brings ostracism, questions, and often a lonely narrowing of options. The 2 daughters at the center of the story were, by all accounts, ordinary children with ordinary hopes. The elder, a teenage girl who loved school and dreamed of university, was described by classmates as bright and considerate. The younger was a cheerful child who liked to sing and play in courtyard corners. To their community they were fixtures, school bags slung over shoulders, small steps through familiar alleys. They held in themselves the kind of unexamined future that makes later loss unbearable. In the weeks before the attack, people noticed a subtle escalation in Ahmed's behavior. He became more withdrawn. At times he seemed agitated, fixated on small slights or perceived slurs. Friends who tried to talk to him found him evasive. Others say he had begun to follow social media arguments into late hours, reading and rereading posts that stoked feelings of grievance. From small observations like these, a pattern of mounting distress can sometimes be inferred, but inference is not the same as certainty. The line separating a man in pain from a man about to commit violence is not always visible, and often the only witnesses are the people closest to him. On the afternoon, the family's modest apartment became a crime scene. The father called his daughters and asked them to come by for a small errand. A school bag had to be collected, or so he said. It was the sort of practical request that masks nothing remarkable. The girls walked up the stairs together, laughter in their steps, unaware of the danger behind the unlocked door. What followed lasted only minutes, though those minutes stretched into lifetimes for those involved. Accounts from the surviving child describe a sudden and brutal assault. The father lunged with a knife, directed first at the elder daughter. Her wounds were multiple and severe. The younger tried to intervene and was cut in the chaos. She escaped to the stairwell, screaming for help. Neighbors rushed in, finding a scene none of them had imagined. The elder daughter collapsed on the floor, the younger girl sustained but alive, and the father bleeding from wounds he inflicted on himself. Paramedics arrived quickly. Police sealed the house. In hours, the neighborhood learned what would be repeated in news bulletins and comments: a daughter dead, a child scarred, a man who might be both perpetrator and victim. The body was taken to the local morgue, and the surviving girl received emergency care. Questions multiplied. Was this premeditated? Was it the product of a sudden psychotic break? Had the father intended to spare himself? Forensics would gather data, but data alone rarely speaks to motive in anything like a full voice. At the scene, investigators recorded small but telling details. The knife used in the attack was standard kitchen cutlery, but forensic analysis suggested it had been sharpened recently and placed so it could be grabbed quickly. Blood patterns indicated more than a single reactive strike. The repeated blows to the elder daughter suggested deep rage, or an intent to ensure she would not survive. Fingerprints, DNA swabs, and witness statements provided a clear sequence: entry, attack, flight of the younger, collapse, and self-infliction. The physical facts formed a narrative that prosecutors later relied upon. This was not an accident. The surviving child's account became central. In a protected setting, with medical and psychological support, she recounted how her father had called them, how the knife flashed, how fear turned to desperate survival. Her voice, small and steadier than anyone expected, supplied the human detail that forensic numbers cannot: the shock, the implausible betrayal, the single instant when a home turned hostile. Psychiatrists examined Ahmed carefully. His history showed signs of untreated mental distress: insomnia, episodes of severe irritability, and signs of low mood. Yet mental illness alone does not explain the premeditated elements investigators suspected. Legal standards draw fine lines between insanity defenses and culpability. To prove diminished responsibility, defense counsel would need to demonstrate that Ahmed, at the time of the acts, could not distinguish right from wrong or control his actions due to a severe psychiatric disorder. It is a high bar, and public opinion, inflamed by the image of a father committing such violence, often demands strict accountability. Beyond pathology, social context matters. In our interviews with local counselors and social workers, a pattern emerges of limited mental health resources, stigma that prevents men from seeking help, and cultural narratives that discourage showing vulnerability. A man who feels his role as provider and father has been stripped away may slide into anger and isolation. Add financial stress, a contentious separation, and perceived humiliation, and the pressure cooker can approach the point of explosion. Many experts warn that early intervention, counseling, mediation in family disputes, community awareness, can sometimes diffuse a dangerous trajectory. Whether such interventions were available or attempted in this family's case is part of the painful inquiry. Neighbors' testimonies revealed a pattern of small alarms that did not, in isolation, trigger action. Ahmed would stand at the window and watch his daughters play from a distance. He argued with his ex-wife on the phone, then hung up. He sometimes posted angry comments online. These are not, on their own, signs of future violence, but in combination with deeper problems, they can hint at a brewing storm if someone notices and offers help. The legal process moved at the pace of bureaucracy and public scrutiny. Prosecutors charged Ahmed with first-degree murder for the death of his elder daughter, attempted murder for the attack on the younger, and related offenses. The forensic report, video of the scene, the surviving child's testimony, and medical reports formed the backbone of the prosecution's evidence. The defense sought to explore psychiatric evaluations and possible mitigating factors. Courts, in such cases, must balance the need for justice, the protection of society, and the legal standards that guard against wrongful punishment of the mentally ill. Public reaction was swift and fierce. Vigils sprouted outside the mosque and the school. Candles burned in front of the apartment building. Messages poured in on social pages calling for justice, but also for support for the surviving child and her family. Social media amplified outrage, but it also opened space for conversation. Comment threads debated the causes of family violence, mental illness, toxic masculinity, a failure of social services. A few voices called for humane solutions, more mental health clinics, better mediation services, education on domestic violence in schools. Others demanded the harshest penalties, arguing that nothing could compensate for brutally lost life. In the aftermath, social workers emphasized the need for more resources for surviving victims. The younger girl would need long-term psychological therapy, safe housing, and educational support. Her mother would require legal aid and community assistance to help her rebuild. Survivors of family violence often face compounded trauma: grief for the lost child, fear for personal safety, and the burden of recovery. While the legal process addresses culpability, it does not heal wounds or restore what was lost. This case poses larger questions about prevention. Could local institutions have stepped in earlier? Could neighbors have recognized patterns that merited a warning? Could schools or clinics provide confidential help when parents show signs of instability? Many experts we spoke to insist that prevention requires a network. Authorities, clinics, religious leaders, and schools working together to spot danger and offer alternatives. Stigma must be reduced. Men must feel able to seek help without shame. Safety planning for families in conflict must be robust and culturally sensitive. For prosecutors and policymakers, the case underscores the need to balance punitive measures with preventive strategies. Sentencing can provide accountability. Rehabilitation programs can aim at preventing recurrence. But broad prevention requires structural investment. Public mental health services, family mediation centers, legal aid, and community education on signs of domestic abuse. No single law can erase the complex web that leads to familicide, but a combination of resources can make such catastrophes less likely. As the trial proceeded, many in the neighborhood returned to their daily routines with a new wariness. Children still played in the streets, but now women watched more closely and people spoke in lower voices. The apartment's balcony remained vacant for months, a mute testament to a life interrupted. The surviving family carried on, bearing scars that would not simply fade. This story, at its heart, is not only about a crime. It is about a fracture in the social fabric that allowed a man's distress to spiral into lethal action. It is about missed chances for intervention, about a community's struggle to understand, and about the long work of healing for survivors. We share it not to sensationalize pain, but to illuminate the pathways that might prevent something similar elsewhere. As you think about this case, consider the small everyday actions that can make a difference. Speaking to a neighbor who seems withdrawn, supporting mental health initiatives, pushing for safer, more accessible services for families in crisis. Justice in the courtroom matters, but justice for a child, truly, begins with prevention. If you found this account important, there are simple ways to help. Support local organizations that provide counseling and shelter, advocate for school-based programs that teach conflict resolution, and amplify the voices of survivors. We owe more than outrage. We owe sustained, thoughtful action, so families do not remain invisible until tragedy strikes. Thank you for listening. If you want a version of this script formatted for voiceover timing, with timestamps and suggested B-roll cues for each paragraph, I can prepare that next, ready for direct import into InVideo or your editing software. Which would you like me to do?